Hello and welcome. My name is John Flowers, Director of Outreach for the Greater Coastal Community Action Council located on Galveston Island. Our agency is tasked with the encouragement of COVID-19 vaccinations for the populations of Liberty and Galveston counties through rigorous education and outreach. Our topic today is a brief overview of the newest non-mRNA vaccine, Novavax. We are blessed to be joined today by Ms. Christine Underhill, a registered nurse and supervisor of nurses for the Texas Department of State Health Services. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It appears that we have a tremendous audience today, and that is fantastic. If I've learned anything of value through this process, it is making good information available to the largest audiences we can. And the questions about the topic today are taken straight from people we meet each day through our outreach activities. So this content that we're creating should be very relevant. But before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself and your personal experiences with the COVID-19 epidemic.
Sure. So I've been a nurse for some years now, and I've had a lot of different roles, from hospitals to home health to county jail, and now with the Department of State Health Services. My absolute favorite thing about nursing is the opportunity to provide health education and real life solutions to health issues. So I'm really enjoying my role now with Department of State Health Services. I was a charge nurse at the county jail during the early days of COVID and when the vaccine first came out. And understandably, there was a lot of fear about COVID inside the jail, since it's hard to isolate people. And people were obviously getting COVID a lot while in jail. And I just really remember young men just really crumpling up and being afraid they would die in jail without their families. And it was really heart-wrenching to take care of those patients. And I was surprised when the vaccine first came out and not a lot of people wanted it, not a lot of the inmates. There was a lot of suspicion and rumors, and we had to really work hard to overcome that. So just like with the general public, I think it was really important that we answered questions, offered education, and really respect people's choices. So I really believe that knowledge is power, and I hope that with knowledge, people are able to make the best choices for themselves. So I just want to take a second and say I applaud everyone who is watching for taking the time to increase their understanding and awareness.
Wow, let me echo that. That sounds to me like you had some pretty, maybe interesting is not the best word for it, but a wealth of experience in this.
I do.
Guess, in this battle.
Yeah.
Well, if it's okay, we're going to jump right into the questions. Okay, and
Absolutely.
so please explain the differences between the COVID-19 vaccines, including the newest non-mRNA vaccine, Novavax.
Sure. So Moderna and Pfizer are the two COVID vaccines which have been the most widely distributed in the United States, and they use a type of technology called mRNA, while Novavax, which is this new one, uses protein technology. And that's what most vaccines that we're familiar with use. So I want to kind of explain this by explaining how vaccines work. Vaccines work by letting our immune system learn about a virus and how to fight it before we actually become infected. Our immune systems can then kind of recall that information and produce the correct antibodies quickly, which is what prevents serious illness. If, on the other hand, we don't have a vaccine, then our immune system kind of has to start from scratch and learn how to effectively fight that virus, which, depending on our immune systems and underlying health, could result in us getting pretty sick while our immune system ramps up and gets those antibodies made. So with the mRNA vaccine, a message on how to fight COVID was sent to our immune system, and our system learned without ever having any part of the virus actually introduced. The Novavax vaccine, on the other hand, uses a small amount of what is called the spike protein from the COVID virus, and this is what is introduced to the immune system. This protein is not the virus. It cannot give you COVID or get you sick. However, it is enough for immune system to recognize the intruder, mount a little attack, and produce antibodies, which in turn, it will remember the next time it sees a COVID virus. The side effects that we often feel after we get that vaccine, that's our immune system learning how to react to the virus.
Wow, interesting. So what are the benefits of the Novavax option as opposed to Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson and Johnson?
So Novavax uses technology similar to the older vaccines that most of us are familiar with, like our childhood immunizations and the flu vaccine. And that's a benefit because some people just feel more comfortable with that technology that they're more familiar with. In addition, the initial clinical trials, which were against the Delta variant, showed just as good effectiveness or efficacy as Moderna and Pfizer, which was about 90% against the Delta variant, keeping people from getting seriously ill or dying. Novavax is good if you have allergies to an mRNA vaccine or if you just had concerns about the technology of the mRNA vaccine. The J&J vaccine, it is available, but it's the least effective. So it's actually not really recommended unless it's the only vaccine that a person is able to take.
Okay, that's great information. What symptoms come as a result of the Novavax vaccine, if any?
Well, kind of as I mentioned before, it's common to have symptoms after receiving any vaccine. The most commonly reported are fatigue, muscle pain, tenderness at the injection site. Normally those last a day or two, maybe a little longer for some people. In really rare instances, a person might have an allergic reaction.
Oh, okay. And so is it like the other vaccinations where it required where being fully vaccinated requires several doses?
Right. So a lot of vaccines are like that. In order to be considered fully vaccinated, a person would need 2 doses. So those can be administered anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks apart, just 2 doses.
Okay, great. And does Novavax pose any drug interaction effects or anything like that?
No, there's no known drug interactions. Novavax can be given at the same time as other vaccines or while taking any medications. Absolutely.
Okay, and so I know from the field that there was a big scare about how children would react to the mRNA vaccines and pregnant women. Can you talk about the safety for children and pregnant women for the Novavax vaccine? Or any of the vaccines for that matter?
Right. So right now, Novavax is only actually authorized in the United States for people over the age of 12. So children between the ages of 6 months and 11, they'd still need to get the Moderna or the Pfizer for their primary series. Novavax is absolutely safe for pregnant women or women who are trying to become pregnant or who are breastfeeding. It's safe to take a vaccine while pregnant. In fact, it'll help protect the mother from becoming seriously ill and possibly have pregnancy complications as a result of illness. Doctors often recommend that pregnant women say get the flu vaccine while they're pregnant or the pertussis vaccine. It's the same thing. It helps keep them from getting seriously ill. There have been several studies here and in Europe and in Canada that have demonstrated that there's no increased risk of pregnancy complications after getting a COVID vaccine. As a matter of fact, there was a small study that showed that babies whose moms got vaccinated were actually born with COVID antibodies, which means they were actually protected from COVID even after they were born.
I always ask that question, not because I don't know the answer, but that is to underscore that because it's such a big concern that we see from the public. So every time that we do one of these, I'm definitely going to get that information out there.
Yeah.
So now we have been administering vaccinations for some time now, and it was necessary with a heroic effort to get the vaccines to market without the opportunity of years of time to test. Has the medical community noticed any long-term effects for any of the vaccines?
This is probably the one I hear the most, particularly when I'm talking to parents about vaccinating kids. So I'm going to kind of address this with a couple of things. So first off, vaccines, they're not like medicines that we take daily for months or even years. They're really designed to do their job quickly and then be eliminated from the body. So the ingredients in that vaccine, they don't hang around our bodies. They don't hang out they get eliminated. Our bodies are really good at getting rid of what isn't needed. So no vaccine ever has had any long-term side effects. And so at this point, over 5 billion COVID vaccines have been given worldwide over the last 2 years with no reports of long-term effects. So I know people talk about that, but there's just nothing to support that. We do, however, have reports of long COVID, which is affecting the quality of life for children and adults. And long COVID can occur even if they did not have a serious case of COVID. The second thing I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I've never heard of that. Did you say long COVID?
Long COVID? Yeah, long COVID is, I think they're classifying as its own separate illness, but basically people are having fatigue and difficulty catching their breath and muscle pain, even if they've had a relatively minor case of COVID, and that's can last 6-9 months. There's people who are still battling it. And it wasn't just for people who were hospitalized. It was actually for people, who had a relatively mild case of COVID.
So it's just a basic elongation of the symptoms that they were receiving.
Right. So the person no longer tests positive for COVID. The virus has been cleared out of their body, and yet they're still battling these symptoms.
Interesting.
I hear a lot of times, again, when I'm talking to parents who are thinking about their children, and Novavax isn't necessarily for kids, but it is for 12 and up. So I hear things about like, well, what about myocarditis, and what about these side effects that we've heard of? And I kind of just want to take a moment to put that into perspective. It's very rare for people to have had these reactions. And obviously we don't want them, but they have been noted. There's a reporting system that people can report any reactions that they've had. So right now, as of December 1st, there have been 700 cases of myocarditis in males between 12 and 18 following a COVID vaccine. That was an mRNA vaccine. That is 700 out of 61 million doses given to males in the United States. So that we've got to really put this in perspective when we're talking about these cases. We hear about them because everybody talks about the bad things, but they don't talk about the 61 million doses that were given that had no adverse reactions at all. So I really want to kind of put that in perspective. Right. 1,500 children in the United States have died in 2 years from COVID.
So that is so the adverse effects are statistically non-existent.
Yes.
Okay.
and all those 700 young men, they recovered. So it's heart inflammation. They recovered, they rested, they got fluids, they were under care of a doctor for a little while. They recovered. Those 1,500 children in the United States who have died, they're not coming back, unfortunately. So I just really want to put that into perspective when parents in particular are thinking about vaccinating their children.
Sure.
But even when they want to get vaccinated for themselves. I'm very passionate about vaccines in general, but COVID in particular, we've seen it, like you said, battling for a couple of years now. So I often hear that the vaccine was rushed or that it wasn't actually approved. And you kind of alluded to that in your question. So that it wasn't actually approved since it's being administered under an emergency authorization. But really, this was a rare instance of many people putting everything else aside and working towards a common goal. And the bureaucratic process for getting things officially approved is really slow and cumbersome. And that's why these vaccines are being administered under what's called an emergency authorization. It's a good thing that the FDA was able to kind of get out of the way for a minute and get these vaccines out to the public in a timely manner.
Yeah, the response that we received in the last video from Dr. Kaiser and the UV doctors was along the same line, but I always ask that question because we get it from the field a lot. So thank you very much for addressing it. So I want to make sure that we're ready to move on from that question to the next.
Yes, we are ready.
Okay. All right. And so are there still ways to receive the vaccines free of charge? Again, I know what the answer to that question is, but it comes up a lot too.
Yeah. Yes. So COVID vaccines are absolutely free to every person in the United States 6 months and older, regardless of their citizenship status or anything else. And there's lots of ways to find vaccines. You can go to vaccines.gov. You can text 438829. You can call a doctor, pharmacy. Department of State Health Services, which is my department, has clinics that can administer those vaccines. And my department in particular, we can do it for all age groups, including infants.
And if you're one of those people that is reaching this video through our QR code campaign, on the same page that you're on right now, there are explicit instructions in both Liberty and Galveston County for where you can go to receive the vaccination at no charge. And you can even set up the appointment online.
Perfect.
Okay, and so that was the balance of our questions today. But before we close, do you have anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
I just really want to encourage every viewer to take the time to do research from reputable sources like the CDC or their local or state health department, or watching YouTube videos like this. In addition, please make sure you and your children are up to date on all your vaccinations. Vaccinations save lives. Thank you.
Ms. Underhill, or Christine rather, thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us today. It was absolutely a pleasure speaking with you, and such great information. So I just wanted to say thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a great day.